I am so excited to have y'all here. I know there's a lot of courses and coaches and webinars on hormones and women's health, and it can quite frankly be so confusing and so overwhelming sometimes, right? And my intention today is to give you a better understanding as to how to use your feminine biology as a superpower to thrive in your work, in your home, and your relationships. And let me tell you, when I figured this out, like all areas of my life got way easier. I'm Dr. Sierra. You've probably seen me on Instagram. If you're here, you've seen my tagline where woo woo meets science. And I am so over the phrase that like everything is normal when you know in your body it's not, right? I have empowered hundreds of women to restore this like innate wisdom that we were born with. And when we are in tune with that, we can have a healthy weight. We can have high natural energy levels. You can have a good sex drive. You can have pretty hair, pretty skin, and move into menopause without having to rely on birth control and HRT and medication. I promise you it is absolutely possible. And that's what we're here to do. Some of these might resonate with you, maybe in the past or maybe presently, but I hear these things all of the time, these concerns in my DMs. One of them being like, my diet and supplement plan just like stopped working for my symptoms. Like things just stopped working, right? They're like, I was doing a diet for a while and now I just can't anymore, right? I'm not seeing the weight loss. I'm not seeing my skin improve. The supplement stopped working. I see that one all the time. Okay, another one is like, you want to excel at everything 100%, right? But you just like can't keep up with the expectations you put on yourself. Maybe it's health, maybe it's fitness, maybe it's your job, maybe it's in your relationships. I get this all the time. My periods cramps are so painful that you end up calling out of work and you're like laid up on the couch, right? You're taking Advil. It's crazy what we'll deal with, right? We think that it's a death sentence when we, are in our teenage years and we get the first one. Also very common, if this resonates, experiencing anxiety and depression, mood swings every month. And you're just like, I don't feel like myself. You know, that's not you, but it just gets weird 1 week or so out of the month. Ah, see, someone almost passed out. Cramps are so bad. Anybody have their doctor tell them that their only solutions were birth control or hormone replacement therapy? Yeah. But this one, right? Being a woman means we just have to deal with it. That's not true either, right? I promise you, you don't have to just deal with it, but it is your responsibility to listen to what your body is telling you. Okay. And symptoms like hormonal acne and unexpected weight gain and mood swings and irritability, energy issues, none of this is your fault, right? These symptoms also aren't the problem. Okay. They are the result of the problem, which is hormone axis dysfunction. And we've got a whole process that works to talk to your sex hormones. And you learned a lot about your sex hormones in the Period Playbook Masterclass. And when your body does not feel safe, okay, when we are overworked, when we have this laundry list of health concerns, that we start to see symptoms. Yeah. So, when you first diet, like the first one, you're like pretty successful. It's like, okay, cool, it works, right? You lose the weight, things are groovy. And then over time, you have to like continue to move the calories down to continue to see results. And we do that over and over and over again. So the body's going to stall, right? You can only go so far to be alive, right? And your lack of weight loss eventually, it's not the problem, right? It's a result that your metabolism has slowed as a protective mechanism for your body, because your body's like, what's happening? We don't have food. We need to slow the metabolism. And so we're not going to respond to this anymore, right? That's actually normal, right? In some cases, but often can also be not normal and super frustrating when you feel like you're doing everything right, especially when this has been going on for years and years. And that's just one example with using weight loss, right? And so we have to start at the top of this hormone hierarchy, right? That's what I've titled this for you. We have to understand the top tier. And before we get into that, what happens when you consider this hormone hierarchy, I just want to show you that this works. Okay, I had a client, we'll call her Nancy. She came to me as a 24-year-old online fitness coach, amateur fitness competitor. Anybody in the health space, like fitness coach or anybody compete? Anybody a health coach or fitness? Anybody compete? Athletes? I know we got some athletes in here. Yeah. Yeah. So some of this might resonate a little bit. Cool. Very cool. Yeah. So she came to me, she had lost her cycle for 14 months. She had extreme hair loss. She was dealing with a ton of sugar cravings, okay? And she had these energy crashes as well as some digestive stuff. Okay. And when we look at somebody's presentation, I don't just want to look at what their symptoms are, what they're telling me. All right. We want to go back. What happened hormonally? Okay. And she started working with me in 2024. All right. But in 2023, we'll just go back to 2017, I guess. That's when she started birth control. Okay. She started birth control in 2017. Okay. Then she had ovarian surgery for a cyst that was super painful at first. Okay. In 2021. Then she stopped birth control a year later. And then 2023 is heavy for her. She lost a parent. She had to go through prep. She lost her cycle. And then we started dealing with it in 2024, right? So it's not just the competition. We have to go back and consider everything that happened with her hormones in the last few years. And these are the things she tried. Okay. If you're a competitor or a health coach, you've probably seen this a lot. Just putting somebody on a supplement protocol, you'll see this is what she had tried. She had tried dropping her workout intensity, adding food, all very typical advice, right? She did what she thought was correct, but unfortunately, she wasn't able to train hard. She was losing confidence. She didn't have good hair, and she didn't want to go out because she'd get bloated at meals. And she was worried about her fertility because she was only 24 and didn't have a cycle, as she should have been, right? She wasn't productive. So our next steps were to run a few tests, and one of it was this hormone panel called a Dutch test. And I love being able to run through this with you so you can kind of see like what this looks like in action when our hormones are kind of out of whack. So normally with a Dutch test, it's taken through the luteal phase, but she didn't have a cycle, so we just took it. But we look here, the way you read this, if you've never seen one, we read it like a car gauge. And so if you're driving, looking at the speedometer, you don't want to be at 0 miles per hour and you don't want to be going at 100. You want to be coasting somewhere in the speed limits. If you're from Canada, bear with me. We're going to use American terms here. And I'll just point out a couple of things. I won't go through everything here. This is a summary page, but her cortisol is a little out of whack. She had this like mismatched cortisol where her free cortisol, that's like what's available in the system, was high, but her metabolized cortisol, that's what's actually being made, is low. And so this usually indicates like thyroid or liver issues, sometimes brain damage. And so there's a lot that we were dealing with. We had to deal with this. Okay. Explain why she was really tired. We see here her sex hormones super low. Okay. They should be in this green range. Remember, they're here in purple at menopausal levels, estrogen and progesterone. No wonder she didn't have a cycle. She had menopausal levels of sex hormones as a 24-year-old. Not normal. Her testosterone was also borderline low. Okay. The only reason it was probably a little bit high is because 80% of your testosterone is made in the adrenals, not in the reproductive system. So she had a little bit there, but I mean, for somebody who wants to put on a lot of muscle and be on stage, not great. Okay. And then her neurotransmitters here, dopamine, norepinephrine, all you need to know about these are happy hormones. Okay. If we're struggling with mood, which she didn't have enough of this. She wasn't crazy. It wasn't her fault. She just wasn't producing enough of these neurotransmitters. So we had the data, we had to go through a plan, and we had to consider this hormone hierarchy. Okay. And so we knew that we had to go over this mismatched cortisol, and we went and supported her thyroid for this. We did some blood sugar balancing, some circadian rhythm regulation. I'm going to teach you about that in just a moment. She had low sex hormones. Okay. We actually worked on some nervous system stuff, which I'll also talk to you about. And then those low neurotransmitters, which were keeping her not super happy, right? We had to actually drop her exercise intensity even more. And we had to address what was going on in her gut, because her gut was actually what was supposed to be making neurotransmitters. So just to show you, when we start with the top of that hormone hierarchy, in just 3 months, she had regular bowel movements. Okay. She was able to have normal digestion. She reduced her stress response, which was really cool. We actually got her cycle back right away in those 3 months, which was awesome. Really, really cool. Fun celebration for her. Okay. And then in the next 2 months, dropped all her sweets cravings. She was no longer ravenous. All right. We reduced her PMS now that she had a cycle, and her sex drive was up. And this is really common to see. She had this like increased feminine expression, which is really common to see when someone comes off birth control and they're starting to revive their sex hormones and feel feminine again. They start to feel at home in their body. Okay. This is just one case. We do this all the time, right? When we actually work with this hormone hierarchy. And so we are going to talk about what this is here. This is the hormone hierarchy. Okay. There are 3 different tiers here, and these are really important. We have tier 1, cortisol and insulin. I'm going to break both these down for you. Okay. Then we have our thyroid hormones, and then we have the sex hormones. And I gave you a ton of information about the sex hormones in the period playbook masterclass, but what I want you to understand, because I got a lot of questions afterwards of like, well, why is this happening? Well, it might not just be the sex hormones. It might be something further upstream. Okay. So we have to address what's going on up here in order to see success down here. So let's talk about glucose and insulin real briefly. Okay. We'll talk about insulin first. To understand insulin, we need to understand what blood sugar is. Okay, this is also called glucose. Probably heard of that. Glucose is a type of sugar. It is found in the foods that you eat, and it's our body's primary energy source. And insulin is what absorbs the glucose in the bloodstream. So the easiest way to think of it is if you think of your body as a car, glucose is the gas that's going to allow the car, the body to go. Okay. And insulin is going to be the key to turn it on. So without insulin, without the key, your body or your car isn't going to work properly, right? And what's really unfortunate is about 92% of the Western population has metabolic issues that include issues with their blood sugar and insulin resistance, where this key function isn't working well. Okay. And if we look at cortisol, drop in chat who's heard of cortisol. Give me a me. Who's heard of cortisol? It's all the rage these days. It's like high cortisol, low cortisol, cortisol face, all these buzzwords, all these buzz phrases. Okay, we're really familiar with what cortisol is. We know that cortisol is the main stress hormone that's going to help us interact with our external environment. It's mildly catabolic, breaks the body down, does raise blood sugar. So there's a relationship there, but it's not all bad. You know, we have it for a reason. It's an anti-inflammatory. It's a natural painkiller. It's going to help us to think clearly and act quickly. And that's what's released in a stress response. And here in a normal rhythm, you'll see that cortisol actually peaks here, like between 6 and 8 a.m. And then it's going to kind of gradually, come down throughout the day, just like the sunshine. Okay. And then the lowest levels at nighttime because you need to go to sleep. And the goal of cortisol and this stress response is to keep us alive. Remember, I said a lot of this comes on when our body doesn't feel safe. It's just trying to stay alive. And our bodies weren't designed to handle continuous exposure to stress. But unfortunately, in this high-paced, like modern world, we are constantly dealing with stressors, whether we're in rush hour traffic or we've got deadlines at work or we've got kids and after school activities or somebody sent us a mean email. Like that fight or flight response is constantly being activated, even though we don't have an immediate threat to our physical survival. And so we got to manage this, right? And we'll start with managing glucose and insulin first. Okay, these are things I teach in my containers to all my clients because it's really important to heal when we are addressing these tier 1 stuff. We need to do this first. So the first thing we do is we talk about how to eat. Okay, we go over meal ordering. All right, I love this little graph here. It explains what food does to our blood sugar. So carbohydrates are not bad. We need them for fuel, but they are the things that are going to raise our blood sugar the highest. Okay. You have the amount of time and how blood sugar is impacted by certain macronutrients. So carbohydrates are going to spike our blood sugar the highest, followed by proteins and then fats. And so in my container, what I typically teach is how to eat, typically in the reverse order. If you have a plate of food, right, typically what you're going to want to do to reduce this blood sugar response is you're going to want to eat fiber first, okay, slowing down digestion. Then your fats and proteins second, and then the carbs last. Okay. Fiber first, fats and proteins second, and the carbohydrates last. Okay. And then we have to talk about meal timing. It's really important that we ensure that we have good meal timing. Oftentimes people get stuck, and maybe this is you, in this go, 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 I'm not hungry in the morning. That right away is something to pay attention to. If you're not hungry in the morning, something to pay attention to, that's part of a stress response. Okay. The second thing is that when we don't eat in the morning time, right, we will see this spike in cortisol, and it's not going to be blunted. It's going to actually go up even more because the body feels stressed that it's starving a little bit. Okay? We need to ensure that we're eating enough and we're eating often. Okay. Especially for women, it's going to be more advantageous to be eating throughout the day, right? Eating a little bit earlier versus later. Okay. A lot of people also struggle with low blood sugar. And when our blood sugar gets too low, cortisol has to come up to break the body down. And so a lot of people will tell me like, hey, I'm actually not, I'm not eating a lot, but I'm not losing weight. I don't understand what's happening. Well, you're not eating a lot. Your body thinks it's starving. It's going to break itself down. Muscle tissue, sometimes fat tissue, right? It's going to try to find resources to keep you alive. And so eating enough sounds really basic, but it's a really important reminder on those days that we're like, I don't really want to eat breakfast, or I don't have time, right? Your body needs you to. Okay. And then we want to talk about managing our cortisol. Okay. There's a lot of things we can do about this, but one of the most impactful things we can do is manage our relationship with light. Okay. I named my entire company on this. All right. If you've ever seen like screen grabs of our Zoom meetings, everybody's in blue light blockers. There's two principles I want you to take away here to help manage your cortisol. Okay. The first thing, you've probably seen it a lot, is getting sunlight earlier in the day. What that's going to do is it's going to match the rhythm of your cortisol. We want to ensure that we're getting good light into our eyeballs. All right. It also helps with hormone production, especially if you can view sunrise specifically. Okay. Making sure we get light throughout the day. And then we want to limit blue light. Okay. You can do it if you're on screens all the time. If you're somebody like me, I work remotely. I'm always on screens. I do limit my blue light. And also at nighttime, I try to shut screens off about an hour before bed to allow that cortisol to drop so that I can go to sleep. Okay. If you're not doing these things already, please do those. Right. You're like, I thought we were going to talk about periods, right? Cycles. This is important because if you're not doing these things, then the body is feeling like it's in this stressed out state. Doesn't matter what you do to your sex hormones. Remember that pyramid? We have to start at the top. So those are very like masculine principles of the to-dos of managing the stress response, what to do with your hormones. But if you watch the period playbook, right, we need to remember that to get to our body to respond at all to all these good habits, we have to be managing our energy. Otherwise, you get stuck being one of those people that's like, I'm doing all the diets, I'm exercising my butt off, I'm taking all the supplements, and I'm not feeling any better. Okay, maybe that hits home for you. And what I find is that most of the women who come to me for help with their cycle problems or transitioning into menopause is that they also suffer with trying to keep up with the daily grind. Okay. Because they're not living in harmony with this timing, right? Their hormone systems are crying out for help. And this entire concept of time, by the way, like your schedule, that's predicated on this like 24-hour cycle, which actually aligns really well with men's hormones, but not women's. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing and that, we have to riot, right? We need a new schedule. It just means to be really aware of how we're spending our energy. And when you start syncing your cycle with your schedule, you can stop trying to master time and you can start think about managing your energy. And this is really interesting. A global consultant company, which sounds super fancy, it was a big business corporation, article that was written back in 2007. They stated this quote that you see here. They said the core problem with working longer hours is that time is a finite resource, but energy is a different story, right? They know that by replacing, these energy depleting behaviors with self-care practices, you actually feel better, you're more recharged, and you can perform better without burning out. And so that's why syncing with your cycle, we taught in the masterclass, is so important for you to be engaged so that you can get to whatever destination it is, health, fitness, business, relationships, a lot faster and usually a lot further than you intended. Buddy, you ask them like, hey, how are you? And they're like, I'm busy. I'm so busy. Or maybe that's you. Like somebody's like, hey, how are you doing? You're like, I'm busy. Think about that for a moment. If you've had that interaction, just think about that. We are so divorced from our feelings that we can't have or even like give an emotional or human response to a simple question. Instead of like telling somebody how you are, we give them this productivity update. And so something I want you to do today is just don't ever do that again, right? I want you to drop this busy badge of honor. We've been conditioned to believe that like the more tasks and the more activities that we pack into our day, that the more valuable we are, right? That's what's taking a toll on your health and your performance, right? It's like this modern day hero's journey where we have to be like constantly productive and efficient hour by hour. And that we just weren't meant to live that way. Right. And finally, I want you to stop believing that your success in anything requires suffering. Okay. If anything, I want you to remember that being a woman is a freaking superpower. And I'm so grateful for the people and the women ahead of us that like trailblaze the way for us to believe that we could do anything we want to do, right? We can do anything we want. Women can be a CEO, they can be an astronaut, they can be the president. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you could if you wanted to, right? You name it, right? Anything a man can do, we can do bleeding, right? And we've proven that without a doubt we can. Man, especially if you're doing this while incurring health expenses, right? Don't get me wrong. I love working hard. Okay. I think working hard for a goal is very good, but if you can start incorporating how to do so in sync with your biology earlier than later, then you're not going to be compromised with all these symptoms. It won't be a cost. And what I've found with working for over 2 years with women who are suffering with hormonal breakdown and struggling with their careers and their relationships and motherhood and keeping up is that their struggles are largely not the results of them not trying hard enough. It's about not factoring in the second biological clock. And so when you can actually sink in and understand your body's biochemistry, you feel energized. You can meet your goals in a sustainable manner, and you really can have it all, right? And so you can start today, right? Set this like true north for your body, your monthly cycle, calming this stress response that we outlined today, and utilizing the principles in the masterclass. And I'll remind you here, if you're experiencing symptoms, they're not the problem. They are the result of the problem, which is this hormone axis dysfunction that's coming up from up top. So you can eliminate the stress response. You can eliminate dis-ease, this lack of ease in the body.